It's a season of new beginnings. And as Rabbi Jordana shared, this is when we start the cycle of Torah readings over again. And once again, we look at the story of creation, stories of creation, as they are handed down to generations of commentary. And we ask these fundamental questions about the text. Why are we here? Where did we come from? Where are we going as a society, as a civilization? What is creation's purpose? And there is one story among the many pieces of creation that has fascinated Jewish philosophers, rabbis, sages for generations to come. That is the specific part of the story where we are taught of the creation of humankind. What is the point? Why are we here? What is it we are supposed to be doing while we're here? The story, according to the sages, teaches us more about why we're here than it teaches about how we got here. It is not meant to be read, according to the Jewish tradition, as a documentary of historical importance. It does not teach us the order of creation, but instead the purpose of creation. So I wanted to share with you as we begin that story again and explore with one another why we're here. I wanted to share with you a bit of writing that I've done this week on one midrash, one creative ascription, one commentary on this piece of the story, how humanity came to be, why the world for us looks as it does. I called this Our Helpmate Through the Darkness. When God began to create the heavens and the earth, when all was still chaos and unformed, humanity seemed to be the pinnacle of creation. The weight and gravitas of creation's pull toward light and knowledge. And we were commanded then to watch over the rest of creation, the plants and animals, the waves lapping upon the shores, the sands of the sea, like the lights of the sky above. It was all ours for the taking, but not to use, to name, to understand. And then to come to understand something about our own nature by looking through them and seeing ourselves in them. The plants, the animals, the waves lapping upon the shores. As each day progressed from darkness to light, from waters to dry land, from reptiles and fish to giant creatures and winged things with feathers, this creation became more and more complex and more desirous of knowing where it came from and why it was here. Yet every animal which roamed the earth had a partner, a pairing, a relationship through which they might begin to see themselves and come to know a way to search for answers, each in their own way. For the search for answers was the point of it all. Standing side by side, looking at one another, a dog was not likely to think of itself a cat, unless, through no fault of its own, they found themselves in the same house, uncertain of whether the face upon which they gaze was unlike or alike to their own. But standing facing their mate, each animal, from the smallest to the biggest, would see a reflection of their own reality gazing back at them through eyes that seemed to know and to see their deepest secrets that they kept. So then dogs knew dogs, and cats understood cats. And everything was in its place, and every part of creation knew itself. And then the world arrived on the sixth day. And God looked around and spoke to no one in particular. Let us make an Adam, an earthly being, but in our own image. For every other image was already taken, God thought, or so we are told. And God said, I'll really break the mold with this one. And God created Adam, male and female, says the text. God created them. Perhaps we are more used to the second chapter's retelling of the story, in which God put the male to sleep and prepared a bit of surgery for him. But we mustn't forget chapter 1, in which they were created together, fused as nothing else in God's earth was, into one being, perhaps, suggest the rabbis, with two faces, one on each side, not able to gaze into the eyes of one another, not able to see reflected back at them that image of themselves which had allowed every animal so far to know itself. It is not good for this Adam to be alone, offered God to no one in particular, but noticing, perhaps on purpose, that this Adam with two faces, male and female together, was capable of sustaining itself without a partner, but didn't seem to know itself very well, staring, as it were, in two different directions. And so they were split. And so they became two distinct beings. And so they turned. They turned to look at one another, having noticed this desire to do so. For God had noticed, perhaps on purpose, that the two parts of Adam had desired one another, had desired a partner, an equal, someone in whose eyes to gaze, someone in whose soul to recognize the divine. Our text tells us that they were created ezer kenegdo, helpers opposite one another, independent and equal. And we wonder why this curious phrase is used, for if we are to help one another, friends, partners, spouses, brothers and sisters all, shouldn't we at least be standing on the same side? No, offers God, speaking to no one in particular. I will create a two-sided thing of my earthly being, Adam, and they will want to turn from different perspectives and sometimes different ideas to look at one another and to see one another, and to look within one another to see the divine. For this is what then it means to be a human being, to find partnership, and not necessarily a spouse, but someone who sees the divine in you as much as you see it in them. And God saw that it was good. In fact, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, a sixth day. And the Midrash teaches that on this day, this first Adam was created, and the sun began to set upon him. Adam cried out in fear to the heavens. It is because of my sin, Adam shouted, that the world is becoming dark around me. For Adam had never known night, and there is a first time for everything. And each of us is afraid when we are confronted with darkness. And Adam cried out again, afraid that this was the end of structure, of order and beauty of creation, that the world was returning to chaos, unformed and ending. This must be then death, thought Adam, that heaven has sentenced upon me. And he vowed then and there to fast and to pray for as long as it took. And yet the sun continued its descent, the dark shadows grew longer, and his sight grew dim. And Eve approached Adam from his right, and had hoped to see a different sight of him, for he was in anguish and terrified. And she felt her heart stir and sought to comfort him, and yet he would not be comforted. And the Midrash teaches that Eve sat down next to him, and cried alongside him. Her words, like her voice, are not included in this ancient text. But what we know is that she must have been scared herself to see darkness overwhelm the earth for this very first time. And yet she put aside her feelings, seeing perhaps that Adam was in more distress than she, or perhaps just understanding the world a little bit better, as Eve that day had found she often did. And Adam was busy blaming himself, too caught up to notice at first Eve's gentle attempt to console and comfort him. And he fasted and cried all night, thinking terrible thoughts, the worst thoughts, thinking the world is ending, thinking it is all my fault and there's nothing I can do. I am powerless in the face of God. And Eve simply approached Adam kenegdo, as his equal, as his partner. She sat and cried with him all through the night. For this is what it means, kenegdo, to be this kind of partner to one another. Eve stays. She doesn't wipe away his tears. Get up, you old fool. Everything's not ending. Give me a break. She doesn't distract or diminish. She doesn't ignore or dismiss. And they sit together all through the long night of the soul as the darkness overwhelms and surrounds them both. And then, as we readers knew it would, the dawn breaks, spilling sunlight back into the world and warmth. And Adam is finally comforted, for he must see it for himself, he explains to Eve. This must be the way of the world, Adam suggests. After his fasting and his crying have led him to no other conclusion, I wonder if Eve wondered in that moment if her presence might have been enough, if Adam's comfort might have led to some for her as well, that they might in time learn to comfort one another at some point during the darkest night. Or does blackness only prevent our eyes from turning towards each other and seeing one another, seeing into one another's eyes to recognize the divine there? There will be periods of light and dark, and the dark can be scary and long and deep, but it ends. And it is only up to us to decide how we will survive the darkness. Will we allow someone in to turn to us, to sit across from us, and to cry with us? Will we let one another into our most vulnerable spaces of fear? And the Midrash teaches that Adam sacrifices a bull, an offering of thanksgiving. And I wonder, what exactly is Adam thankful for? After having survived the first long night, is he simply grateful to see the sun again? Does he imagine that God had planned to end the earth all along, but then decided to give them another chance and a new day was born? All thanks to God. But what makes more sense to me is that in this moment of fear and fragility, that Adam and Eve both realized that this is indeed the way of the world, that there will be periods of darkness and light, that fear and uncertainty are built into the system, but that what is also built in, what is coded into us from the beginning, when God began to create the heavens and the earth was just beginning to tip towards order and beauty, is that it is not good for Adam to be alone. And that Adam's thanksgiving offering is for Eve. For God noticed, perhaps on purpose, that we need one another. That once we recognize that desire in ourselves to see and be seen by another, to live in relationship with the world, we see that we are equals. We see the many ways we can become partners, turning towards one another always. And Ecclesiastes wrote, "Two are better than one, for they have greater return on their energy. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. It's always a shame when anyone falls with no one to help them up." Shabbat shalom.